Imagine being told you could only eat 2 ounces of butter per week. That's less than half a stick. Now imagine, that's not just butter. It's meat, cheese, sugar, and basically everything that makes food taste good. For millions of people during World War II, this wasn't some diet trend or challenge. This was life. And the meals they created to survive, most of us today wouldn't touch them with a 10-foot pole. But here's the twist. These bizarre makeshift dishes kept entire nations alive. And some of the stories behind them are darker and stranger than you'd ever expect. Before the war, Britain was importing roughly 70% of its food. We're talking about 20 million tons of supplies shipped across the ocean every single year. Then the war hit, and suddenly those supply lines were under constant attack. German U-boats prowled the Atlantic, sinking cargo ships faster than they could be replaced. Imports dropped to barely a third of what they used to be. The government knew they had a massive problem on their hands. People were going to starve unless something changed immediately. So in January 1940, rationing began. Every person got a ration book filled with stamps and coupons. Your weekly allowance was pathetic by today's standards. 4 ounces of bacon or ham, 2 ounces of butter, 2 ounces of tea, 8 ounces of sugar if you were lucky. Meat was rationed by price, not weight, which meant you got whatever cheap cuts the butcher had left. Cheese, eggs, milk, canned goods, all restricted. Going to the grocery store became less about choosing what you wanted and more about figuring out how to make a meal from whatever stamps you had left. Every single day was a puzzle. How do you feed a family when you barely have enough ingredients for one decent dish? Housewives became master strategists overnight. They stretched ingredients in ways that would make modern chefs cry. They learned to make something taste like anything but what it actually was. And the government? They weren't just rationing food. They were literally telling people what to eat and how to think about it. Enter Lord Woolton, the Minister of Food, and his now infamous creation, Woolton pie. This dish became the symbol of British wartime cooking, and not in a good way. Picture this, a pie crust filled with diced carrots, turnips, potatoes, cauliflower, and whatever other vegetables you could scrounge up. No meat, no gravy, no flavor to speak of. Just boiled vegetables under pastry, held together with oatmeal and vegetable water. The government promoted it as nutritious and filling, which technically it was. But let's be real, this was desperation cooking, dressed up as patriotic duty. Lord Woolton himself became the face of wartime food propaganda. His team published recipe after recipe, designed to make vegetables seem exciting. They pushed leafy greens, root vegetables, and basically anything that could grow in British soil. The message was clear. Meat and imported goods were for the troops. Civilians would make do with whatever the ground could provide. Woolton pie wasn't just a meal. It was a psychological tool to make people accept their new reality without complaint.
But the government's propaganda went way beyond just promoting vegetable pies. They crafted one of the most brilliant lies of the entire war, and it involved carrots. You've probably heard the myth that eating carrots improves your night vision. Guess where that came from? British intelligence needed to explain why their pilots were so damn good at shooting down German planes in the dark. The real reason? They'd developed secret radar technology that gave them a massive advantage. But they couldn't let the Germans know that. So they started spreading stories about how British pilots ate tons of carrots to see better at night. Newspapers ran articles about it. The Ministry of Food jumped on board, pushing carrot-based recipes as if they were miracle foods. And people bought it completely. Suddenly, everyone was eating carrots like their lives depended on it. Carrot fudge became an actual dessert. Carrot jam replaced fruit preserves. Carrot puddings, carrot cookies, carrot everything. Parents told their kids to eat their carrots so they could see in the blackouts. The entire nation was fooled into eating root vegetables for dessert because of a cover story for military tech. The carrot obsession was just the beginning of a much weirder trend: mock foods. When you can't get the real thing, you make a fake version and pretend it's almost as good. The sheer creativity of these substitutions was honestly impressive, even if the results were horrifying. Take mock bananas, for example. Real bananas disappeared from Britain almost immediately after the war started. Kids who were born during the war had never even seen one. So resourceful home cooks mashed up cooked parsnips, added banana flavoring, and shaped them to look like the real thing. Did they taste like bananas? Absolutely not. But when you haven't had fruit in years, your standards drop pretty fast. Mock cream was another favorite. With dairy rationed to nothing, people mixed margarine, milk, and sugar into a paste that vaguely resembled cream. Mock goose involved taking cheap cuts of meat or even just vegetables, seasoning them heavily, and calling it goose. There was mock apricot, made from carrots and apricot flavoring. Mock brains, yes, brains, made from leftover porridge mixed with flour and onions, then fried to look like the real thing. Who even thinks of that? Someone who's tired of eating plain oatmeal every single day. That's who. The mock food phenomenon revealed something darker about wartime psychology. People weren't just hungry. They were craving normalcy. They wanted to feel like they were still eating real meals, even when they knew they weren't. The government encouraged this fantasy because it kept morale up. If you could sit down to mock goose on Sunday, maybe you could pretend life hadn't changed that much. But everyone knew the truth. These weren't substitutes. They were survival. Bread became another battleground in the fight against hunger. Before the war, most people ate white bread made from refined flour. It tasted good, had a nice texture, and was cheap. But refining flour wasted valuable nutrients, and the government couldn't afford waste. So they introduced the national loaf, dense, gray, wholemeal bread fortified with calcium and vitamins. People hated it. It was heavy, didn't rise properly, and tasted like cardboard. But that was all you could get. The government didn't stop there. They launched campaigns telling people to eat less bread altogether. Posters everywhere said things like, "Go easy with bread. Try potatoes instead." Potatoes became the ultimate filler food because they grew easily in British soil and didn't require imports. Every household was encouraged to bulk up meals with potatoes instead of bread. Potato pastry replaced flour-based pastry. Potato scones, potato pancakes, potato bread. If you could make it with potatoes, someone did.
And then there was dripping. If you're lucky enough not to know what that is, let me explain. Dripping is the fat that drips off meat while it's cooking. In peacetime, most people threw it away or used it for cooking. During the war, it became a spread. Bread and dripping was a staple meal, literally just animal fat smeared on bread, sometimes with a bit of salt. It sounds disgusting, and honestly it kind of was, but when butter is rationed to 2 ounces a week and you've got a family to feed, you make do. Some people even added meat juices or gravy to make it more palatable. This wasn't poverty food. It was reality for millions. Food waste became a criminal act in the public's eyes. The government collected kitchen scraps from every household to feed pigs, which would eventually become food again. Bins labeled pig food appeared on street corners. If you threw away potato peels or vegetable trimmings, you were basically helping the enemy. The slogan, "Waste not, want not," was everywhere, drilled into people's heads until every scrap mattered. Victory gardens became essential to survival. The government launched the Dig for Victory campaign,
encouraging every family to grow their own vegetables. Parks, backyards, rooftops, even bomb sites were turned into gardens. If you had a patch of dirt, you were expected to plant something. Potatoes, carrots, cabbages, onions, anything that could supplement the meager rations. People who'd never gardened in their lives suddenly became amateur farmers. Growing your own food wasn't a hobby or a way to connect with nature. It was literally the difference between eating and going hungry. The government distributed millions of leaflets with recipes and growing tips. The Ministry of Food published Potato Pete and Dr. Carrot propaganda characters to make vegetables seem fun and appealing, especially to kids. Potato Pete had his own song and everything. The message was relentless. Grow it, eat it, don't waste it. And people listened because they had no choice. Recipes became exercises in extreme creativity. How do you make a cake without eggs, butter, or sugar? Wartime cooks figured it out. Eggless sponge cake used vinegar and baking soda to create rise. Butter was replaced with margarine or lard. Sugar was cut down to almost nothing, and dried fruit provided whatever sweetness the cake had. The result? Dense, barely sweet, and nothing like what we'd call cake today. But it was something to celebrate with, and that mattered. Meatloaf became a way to stretch tiny amounts of meat as far as possible. You'd take a few ounces of ground beef or pork, mix it with oats, breadcrumbs, grated vegetables, and whatever scraps you had, then bake it into a loaf. One small portion of meat could feed an entire family this way. It didn't taste great, but it filled stomachs. The same logic applied to soups and stews. Add water, add vegetables, add potatoes, and suddenly one chicken could make enough soup for a week. Some substitutions bordered on absurd. People made tea without tea leaves by boiling used leaves multiple times or using herbs. Coffee was replaced with roasted barley or chicory. Eggs were powdered and reconstituted with water, which worked for baking, but tasted nothing like fresh eggs. Condensed milk replaced fresh milk in recipes. Every ingredient that used to be taken for granted suddenly required a workaround. The psychological toll of eating this way for years can't be overstated. Imagine never having enough, never tasting anything rich or indulgent, never having a meal that truly satisfies you. People dreamed about food. They talked about what they'd eat once the war ended. Butter, real meat, chocolate, fruit. These became fantasies. And the government kept pushing the message that sacrifice was patriotic, that going without was helping win the war. But here's what's wild. These meals worked. They kept millions of people alive through 6 years of brutal conflict. Malnutrition existed, especially toward the end of the war, but mass starvation never happened.
The combination of rationing, mock foods, victory gardens, and sheer creativity meant that Britain survived. People adapted in ways that seem almost unimaginable now. Some of these wartime recipes left a permanent mark on British culture. Woolton pie is still referenced today as a symbol of wartime resilience. Older generations remember the taste of national loaf and dripping sandwiches with a strange mix of nostalgia and disgust. The experience of making do with less shaped an entire generation's relationship with food. They learned to waste nothing, to appreciate every bite, and to get creative when resources ran dry. And the propaganda? It worked so well that some of the lies outlasted the war. People still believe carrots improve night vision, even though it was always a cover story. The idea that vegetables can replace meat in a satisfying way took root and influenced post-war nutrition thinking. The government's ability to control not just what people ate, but how they thought about food, was a masterclass in psychological manipulation. Looking back now, it's almost impossible to imagine living that way. We're used to grocery stores overflowing with choices. We throw away food without thinking twice.
The idea of eating mock bananas made from parsnips or spreading animal fat on bread seems insane. But that was normal life for millions of people less than a century ago. They didn't have a choice. They had ration books, propaganda leaflets, and whatever they could grow in their gardens. These meals weren't just about nutrition. They were about survival, creativity, and resilience under unimaginable pressure. Every mock recipe, every stretched ingredient, every victory garden was an act of defiance against starvation. The people who lived through it didn't complain, they adapted. They made carrot fudge and pretended it was a treat. They ate Woolton pie and told themselves it wasn't so bad. They grew vegetables in bomb craters and called it victory. So the next time you're at a grocery store, overwhelmed by choices and throwing a fit because they're out of your favorite snack, remember this. Your great-grandparents survived on 2 ounces of butter a week and considered themselves lucky. They made entire meals out of root vegetables and leftovers. They ate things you wouldn't feed to your dog and called it dinner. And somehow, they made it work. Could you do the same? Could you turn parsnips into fake bananas and convince yourself it's fine? Could you grow vegetables in your backyard just to avoid starving? Could you make a pie out of turnips and oats and serve it to your family with a smile? The people of World War II didn't have a choice, but their ingenuity, their creativity, and their sheer determination to survive created a legacy that's equal parts inspiring and absolutely wild. These 20 meals fed a nation when nothing else could. And honestly, that's both incredible and terrifying to think about.